Okay, so we have learned two things as a result of the Iran war, which bear on the two different mechanisms, and then together they're particularly pernicious for the Gulf. Number one, the United States is not the guarantor of stability in the Persian Gulf. It, in fact, has had to move its forces back from the Persian Gulf. The carriers have to stay out of harm's way. The bases I think it's 13 bases in 7 different countries that the United States has in the region have been attacked and destroyed and hurt more than the administration admitted. And we now have satellite photography analysis where we can triangulate the European satellite photography with some of the Iranian satellite photography and really see that damage. So what that means is that first dimension, the big thing we've learned is the United States is not the guarantor of security, where other states in the region can just go along with the United States, assuming America carries the security risk for them. We learned that's just not the case. The second thing we've learned is that Iran has the ability to control instability. That's what the drones are, the mines are. These are the tactical details, but the concept here, and this is what I'm going to be developing more in my writing on the Substacks, is a concept of instability that's being manipulated. And that's something that works tremendously to Iran's favor. And they have more tools at their disposal than the drones and the mines because they have the proxies. And by the way, the proxies can also have more drones. So right now, we're used to thinking of, well, the proxies have certain capability right now. But over time, there's every reason to expect those proxies, whether it's Hezbollah, whether it's the Houthis, are going to want more drones. And they're going to want to dig some of those more deeply underground. Now, maybe not as far down as Iran, but nonetheless, everybody is learning the details here, but the concept that I'm focusing on, and that's what I'm really trying to explain here, is there's a concept, not just a detail, is the logic of instability as a strategy. That's really what we've discovered in these last 3 months. So you put these two things together. Number one, the United States is not the guarantor of security for the region, for all those states. And number two, there is a strategy of instability here that works tremendously to the advantage of these what we thought of as the weaker powers and can actually spread, as I said, to even the proxies. So what you're going to see then are the two mechanisms. Number one, the region will start to become not just multipolar in a sense of 2-3 powers, Iran, Israel, Saudi Arabia, but notice all the countries you were listing off, Turkey, and the way I'm explaining it is you're going to see, you could call it extreme multipolarity or political fragmentation, where you're just going to get more and more atomization, where each country will focus on their own direct interests as their governments understand them. Sometimes that will create opportunities for some action in concert, sometimes not. But what you're going to see is much less of everything moving in unison one way or another, which is why when President Trump said, hey, all you countries I just talked to signed the Abraham Accords, as far as I know, not a single one, if I understand correctly, signed up, and even Saudi Arabia, which I think Trump thought was in his pocket on this, said no way. So if I understood, he actually lost ground when he made that statement. But my point is that's mechanism number one that's working toward this greater instability. But mechanism number two is that it works strategically in the favor of certain countries, and that you put those two things together, you're just going to see ongoing instability here. And I'm not going to be surprised here if you end up with a much higher price of oil than anybody's imagining. So that's why earlier this week I put out a post about the thing that's not being discussed in the meeting is directly the price of oil. All these negotiations, this MOU, is all being around, can we open the straits? Can we do this, do that here? But I think what's going to happen is, let's assume you get an MOU. What everybody is going to focus on is the price of oil really going to come down? And is it going to come down fast enough before the inventories run out? So just to be clear, in 6 weeks, we have an inventory countdown in weeks. Not months, in weeks. And what you're seeing now by multiple oil executives, and what you're seeing is that we can see the drawdowns coming below operational minimums about the middle of July. Now, will it be the 21st of July? The 20, we can't, that's too detailed, but we know it's coming here in a matter of about 6 weeks. And we know that that's increasingly being said. So I think what you're gonna see is this idea of instability is going to be in about 4 to 4 weeks is going to start to become clear to the world, Mario. And my job here has been to anticipate what's coming. And that's what I try to do all the way through. All the months you and I have been talking is what's coming next in the next few weeks. What's coming is, I think the world's going to wake up to this new age of instability. And I'm going to talk about it as a concept, not just the details, although we can talk about every single detail you want. But the big thing I try to offer, Mario, is a framework, is a concept to understand what's coming. And that was true with the escalation trap. That was true with horizontal escalation. That was true with Iran emerging as a fourth center of world power. And now I think it's that age of instability that's coming. And this is what what states and governments are going to have to grapple with here. It's not going to just be, everything go back to $63 Brent crude here, like it was, I think, on February 22nd.
Okay, so there's 3 great concepts, and I've got a lot of questions about all 3 of them. The one is escalation trap. We've talked a lot about this, and the question I had before, and I'll throw it in there to kind of put it all together, is like, do you expect those clashes that are happening now to potentially lead us back into an escalation trap as early as now?
Without a doubt, that's still there. I know people want the escalation track, let's call it, to be off the table. And the reason is because they understand intuitively that this would breed more economic instability and more harm and so forth. The problem is that, again, for President Trump here, the MOU, even if he signs on the dotted line, there is still these giant set of issues that will not go away. Donald Trump could even agree that Iran will keep all of its enriched uranium, sign on the dotted line, and then 2 weeks later rip it up and say, I changed my mind. Another key example on the escalation trap, Mario, is imagine there's the MOU signed, but 2 weeks from now, Netanyahu runs in to Donald Trump and says, we've got the new supreme leader in our gun sights. It's a little more deep than we can go as Israel. Will you just do this with a B-2 and you can kill that new leader in 12 hours? Now, do we really think Donald Trump is going to say, oh, no, I signed an MOU. I'm keeping to my word. I'm not going to take out the new supreme leader. I think it's of course possible, but I think a more plausible will be that at some point we will get some pretty hard intel on where that new supreme leader is, despite all the effort he will go to make that difficult. Remember, we did get bin Laden eventually. Okay, so and I think that when we get that intel, it's going to be almost irresistible, Mario, for the U.S. to go there. And then what that's going to do, of course, is get us right back into this. So people want this whole, I understand they want it to be over, but that's coming from their heart. My job is to come with the head and say, okay, I hear you, but here's what's more realistic to expect going forward. So that's the
So,
escalation.
trap. And before we go to the horizontal escalation, I'll kind of mention all three pillars and how each one has its own risks. So the first one you started talking about now is the age of instability, which I found fascinating, is that Iran benefits from instability, whether it comes to the Strait of Hormuz or being able to advance its interests through its proxies, because it won this war strategically and it's developed a very strong deterrent. And then you've got multipolarity that will pull in so many different directions that we will not go back to the oil price that we had before. And it brings a perpetual oil volatility in a perpetual or long-term era of instability. So that's on that pillar on why this is not good news. Not good news for multiple countries that are involved directly and indirectly. Then we have the escalation trap, which we've talked a lot about, is that you've given some good examples. The one about Mushtaba, it's wild that this is even a thing that you want to, it's going to be irresistible to kill the leader of a country you just signed an agreement of peace with. But that's the world we're in. We just seen that happen time and time again.
Yeah,
and
we
then
can't blow that off, Mario. And it's because, as you just said, twice in past the year, I mean, within 12 months, we have seen that it's been irresistible to resist the temptation here once you have those coordinates. And I'm explaining that that's one of the issues in the escalation or smart bomb trap going back in history. That when Ronald Reagan in 1986 thought he had Gaddafi in his gun sights with the F-111s, couldn't resist that attack. When Bill Clinton thought he could degrade, maybe he didn't know he could actually kill Milosevic, maybe that's going a little too far, but he certainly thought they were going to degrade the Milosevic regime, take out a lot of the cronies and so forth in a 3-day, and he went right for that. And I'm telling you that in actual cases where I have been in the room, I have seen very, very senior leaders here, once they see the capability of these precision weapons within just 3-meter accuracy, which means they can hit a room, their mind immediately goes to, can I kill the person who's my enemy? And so this is this is something that is one of the key mechanisms of that escalation trap. And there's no reason to think Donald Trump has, quote, learned his lesson on this. The idea, that's what I think people keep thinking, that Donald Trump will just learn his lesson. You see, he's touched the iron once, he won't touch it again. And the problem is that's just not the incentive structure that you see with Donald Trump.
And then you've got the third one, which is horizontal escalation. And we've seen that throughout the war, where Iran retaliated by striking the entire region and leveraging its proxies. And that worked. Obviously, as we've seen right now, it's even done it in the limited clashes that we've seen. Kuwait was attacked 2 days ago, 3 days ago. Dubai was attacked a week ago after Project Freedom. And there is something that Trita Parsi said to me yesterday. He said, Mario, I think Iran would continue, and that's the question I have for you, Professor, would continue the strategy of horizontal escalation if, for example, there's a ceasefire sign that includes Lebanon, a red line for Iran, and Israel decides, as they usually do, to breach that ceasefire and continue their strikes again. Well, what Iran can do in a way that could avoid direct confrontation with the US is not strike Israel, is strike Israel's closest ally that will also impact the global economy while also indirectly impacting the Israeli alliance, and that's the UAE again, which has been a habit of Iran.
Let me give you a specific scenario about how that possibly could play out, just so that we have a concrete one. So you're right, and Trita, by the way, joined me on that big live event that we did in DC a week ago.
He's great,
Boys and Poets, and he was just brilliant. So I think Trita and you are exactly right to worry about how things could start to unravel in Lebanon. But let me give you a more detailed way in which that might happen. So if you imagine here that Iran is, of course, very unhappy that things have not calmed down in Lebanon, and there's good reason to think they won't calm down, then they also have the Houthis. And the Houthis, as we already know, have already intervened to attack Israel, to go toward there. And then you could say, well, okay, we can have American forces try to shoot down Houthi missiles or future drones or so forth. Of course, we're running out of interceptors to do that. But nonetheless, you could say that. Well, but Iran, with horizontal escalation, has some more options, which is it can also encourage the Houthis to shut down Red Sea oil exports. So that this is something that is, again, or Iran has horizontal escalation here where they have some escalation leverage. They have rungs up the escalation ladder, especially with oil and gas that they have not used yet. And that can come in to either serve as a deterrent. So if, Israel, well, the Houthis are attacking us, do something about it, world, America, and so forth. Well, there's going to be some deterrent power that Iran has to protect its Houthis here. And then if it turns out that it needs to actually use it, it can go up that rung and it can start to threaten incrementally the Red Sea exports. It can start to incrementally threaten the pipelines. This is a form of the escalation, this horizontal escalation, where we haven't really seen the limit of it. What we have seen, by the way, is that Iran has been calibrated in how it has used its horizontal escalation. It's, I think, catching people by surprise because the Trump administration has keep wanting to have this victory idea that Iran is discombobulated, its government doesn't work, nothing can be done it can't even negotiate in a reasonable way or something, when in fact what I'm observing is calibration. I'm not observing it necessarily on an hour-to-hour, second-to-second basis, but what I am observing is the kind of calibration that generates power here, where they're able to calibrate over a period of, say, 24 hours of a wide variety of their activities. They can calibrate their diplomatic activities. They can calibrate their diplomatic activities in concert with military strikes, and they can calibrate the military strikes themselves. So you put all that together, that's a fair degree of calibration that Iran is exhibiting. And you add that to their wanting to contain Israel in Lebanon here as a point of instability. So you can see right away, Lebanon is not disconnected from this system in the Gulf anymore, is what I'm trying to say. This era of instability has a lot of connective tissues here. So the idea that, Israel's going to go about its merry business in Lebanon, it's not going to matter to the rest of the Gulf, I think that's just unlikely. It's possible, but much more plausible are going to be the connections I'm making, especially over weeks.
How high is the risk for a regional war? I know we've just been through a regional war, but I mean a regional war that would involve more parties directly inside the war, the Gulf directly involved, for example. So let's say Iran strikes the UAE. The UAE retaliates against Iran. Other Gulf countries join that retaliation. Israel joins. So that type of regional war.
I think it's right now only moderate or low in the next month or so, next few months here. But I think it could rise as we get through the midterms and as we get into January, Mario, because the issues here that I'm describing of this, sort of persistent instability, prolonged instability, they're gonna have more effects here. They'll have economic effects that I've just been talking about. They'll have political effects, and they're going to start to weaken the UAE. They're going to start to weaken governments over time in ways they're going to become more and more concerned about their survival. And then once we get through the midterms, we may discover President Trump, if not even just with everything else stayed the same, he may become much more interested in coming back for another round of escalation here. Because you see, there is a lot of pressure on Trump related to the midterms. The way you know that is he expressly said he's not being pressured by the midterms. That tells you right away that's like number one on his mind. So we all know how that works psychologically. But what that also means is as this plays itself out here, it's not the case that escalation is linear in a day-by-day fashion. So if you recall my 20 years of modeling, I said that once we bombed Fordo, it would be a year or two later we would come back for regime change bombing. And then it turned out to be only eight months, but it was still 8 months. It wasn't literally the next week. Well, this is the problem with this age of instability I'm describing. So there is not this equilibrium point that's going to be solid here, and everybody will have just learned their lesson here. No, this is not the way great power politics and crises unfold. But to directly answer your question, I think that you're not going to see the region-wide war here, even though people will talk about it. I think the risks are pretty low over the summer and I think into the fall. I think they would, unless there's some big change here that we don't see coming, I think, though, this is going to become much more serious as we get into January, and a little bit like the Iran-Iraq war. So if you follow the trajectory of the Iran-Iraq war, nobody started out. Saddam Hussein did not start out to fight an 8-year war against Iran. I guarantee you that. Okay, he thought he was going to get a quick and decisive victory. And then when it didn't happen, he thought, oh, okay, this will be a 6-month war. Well, then it turned into the long war. You see what I mean? That nobody starts out with
Russia's another example.
Russia-Ukraine, many of the long wars that we have seen, they don't start out being long wars. What happens is there are these instabilities in the process, or mostly the politics here, of who's gaining and who's not, who's declining. That is what keeps it going on and on. Germany in World War I. 1916, Russia's dropping out of the war. You might, perfect for Germany. They should stop the war right there, cut a deal with Britain, end the war right there. They've got their victory against Russia. What happens? No, they go for unconditional surrender by Britain with an economic blockade even more fierce than before, which only ends up bringing America in a couple years later to totally discombobulate Germany and basically bring them a major defeat. So states here are just not, it's not easy for these states to get out of these escalation traps, even when it ultimately works to their disadvantage.
Another thing that I'm concerned about is when you cross a certain red line, you get into uncharted territory. The nuclear weapons is probably the most obvious example. And I feel like so many red lines have been crossed in this war. That's another reason why the instability will be different to the instability we had over the last few decades. A direct war between the US and Iran is something that has never happened before. All presidents avoided it. Iran avoided it. And now we've gone through it and we understand the outcomes of it. Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz the way it did now. Iran-Iraq war is probably the only comparison we have. The Iran striking the entirety of the Gulf. All these things are things that were barely even imagined over the last few years, have now become reality, and these lines have been crossed.
Reality, and what Iran. So we used to describe Iran, and many people still do, Iran as a crazy state. They're irrational, they're crazy, filled with either religion, or now it's the military in charge, and the military is said to be more war prone. But the rational thing for Iran to do right now is to, as aggressively as they can, develop nuclear weapons. That's absolutely. I think that if you were to get almost any security analyst here who didn't have to worry about their future contracts or something, but again, an actual secret ballot here, okay, the fact of the matter is there was already, of course, huge incentives for Iran to develop nuclear weapons before. That's why they're developing the enriched uranium to 60%. That's a clear tell they're heading toward. They're at least thinking about that direction. But now here, when you look at what options do they have for their long-term security, nuclear weapons, even with the oil instability in Hormuz, nuclear weapons here have always been the ultimate security blanket. That's, I mean, think of it. Is America going to give up its nuclear weapons? Is Israel going to give up its nuclear weapons? Why not? Okay. Why is only Iran supposed to be, open to military attack here? So I think that Iran is, I would bet it's a year, 18 months from now, it's 90% likely Iran will find a way to test probably not one, but two nuclear weapons. And it may do it even starting from scratch here without the material of the 60% that we're probably trying to monitor so closely. Iran is a gigantic country. It does, it will want to test more than one, I would suspect, for credibility that it has more than one here. And this is going to be another giant earthquake here for the Gulf over time and create even more instability over time. So I think the Gulf region is unfortunately destined for a significant instability for several years to come. And it's a product of it was already, of course, concerning, but this significant instability is a direct product of the bombing of Iran. This would not have been the case before. And now this escalation trap here it's widening. And I think the concept to talk about is the era of instability.